I'm picking up comments, and someone has said that I'm just skimming the surface about conspiracy theories, and of course you're absolutely right. I remember reading Foucault's Pendulum and also the dreadful Dan Brown, which is simply a Foucault's Pendulum light. But Umberto Eco is quite right. The conspiracy theory is simply a balm to a troubled mind. In Plato's Ion, Socrates questions Ion, who claims to be an expert on Homer, and he teases him, you're not speaking from art, but by divine possession, like the Bacchic maidens who draw milk and honey from the rivers when they are possessed. Plato, through Socrates, implies that true inspiration is irrational, divine, and external. It's not reason deduction, but enthusiasmos, being filled with a god. And the same motive appears in the Phaedrus, where Socrates lists 4 kinds of divine madness: the prophetic from Apollo, the ritual from Dionysos, the poetic from the Muses, and the erotic from Eros. In conspiracy thinking, this translates into the idea that one is inspired or woken up. One is woke. One is special, set apart from the sheep. People see the hidden truth. They get the Gnostic truth, much like Ion claims to channel Homer through divine force. It flatters the ego, disguising itself as revelation. It makes you feel special. The Milesian philosophers sought to impose order on nature. Thales thought everything was water, and argued for a principle called the epeiron, the indefinite, and Heraclitus famously said the hidden harmony is better than the obvious. This preference for the hidden, the arcane, the esoteric over surface chaos is foundational. Conspiracy theories, too, are modern expressions of this philosophical craving, the belief that beneath random headlines there lies an intelligible plan if only you are clever enough or inspired enough or favoured enough to be able to unravel, to be able to define that plan, to be able to see that plan. After Nero's suicide in 68 AD, many of the Roman citizens refused to accept his death. He'd been emperor for a very long time, and if your understanding of Nero is based solidly on the film or the book of Quo Vadis, then you have quite a misunderstanding. As the Emperor Tacitus records, at least 3 impostors rose claiming to be Nero, returned from the dead. One was even received by Parthian royalty, even in death, Tacitus said, Nero didn't lose the ability to persuade his people, but Tacitus says, per idem tempus falsum Neronum Asia et Achaea agitabant. At the same time, Asia and Achaea were troubled by a false Nero. Tacitus doesn't dwell on the impostor, but he notes that the provinces were agitated by rumours that Nero was still alive. The impostor had some success in Achaea, where Nero had once toured and been admired, and the region's nostalgia for him made the deception more plausible. Tacitus also records a popular belief in Nero's return, not just his survival. This is especially potent in the eastern provinces, where there's ideas of life beyond death. Suetonius, always eager to record public gossip and oddities, says, Quinit post mortem eius per multos annos celebratus est in oriente rumor, vivere eum et rediturum nec defuere qui specie ac voce eius assumpta multus falerent. Indeed, for many years after his death, a rumour was widespread in the East that he was alive and would return. Nor were there those lacking who, having assumed his appearance and voice, deceived many. So it's part of a plot. And here Suetonius captures what I think one could probably call a messianic tone about some of the rumours. They weren't just survival, but return. And Cassius Dio, who writes in Greek a century later, provides perhaps the most detailed narrative of one of these impostors who emerged under the emperor. Who is it now? I've got it right. Under the Emperor Titus, that would be the right time. And he says, "Ana tis ep elpidi tu toiton neron ephipalin gegonenai, ke edon ekriboligeto omios ekini." And that would be a certain man, hoping to gain something, claimed that Nero had come back to life, and by singing he mimicked him exactly. And the impostor was welcomed by the Parthians because people want assurance. And the Parthians should have known the difference between the original and the impostor, because they'd been on relatively good terms with Nero, but they were blinded by their desire. Dio recounts that the Parthian king Artabanus III at one point supported the man, which created the diplomatic headache for Rome, and eventually the Romans demanded his surrender, and he was executed. Does this not sound a little bit like the doppelgangers in the Kremlin? Because people want Putin to survive, he does. Outside of formal histories, Sibylline oracles, the Jewish and Christian apocalyptic literature written in Greek, mention a king who fled Rome and shall return, widely believed to refer to Nero. And this notion of Nero redivivus, Nero reborn, was interpreted by early Christians as a kind of antichrist figure. A great-hearted king shall come out of Babylon and he shall return again. Kepalin exi. And this formed the foundation of the myth of Nero's return from the East, which persisted for over a century. Nero's theatricality, his populist gestures, his shocking demise created fertile ground for myth-making, and his suicide left a vacuum and an emotional residue which was quickly filled by conspiracy. Early Christians, notably in the Apocalypse of John, coded references to Rome and Nero. Many scholars would interpret the beast whose mortal wound was healed in Revelations 13:3 as a cipher for Nero redivivus. So the key sources, Tacitus, Suetonius, and Cassius Dio, all attest to the presence of belief in Nero's survival and return. He became more than a man, a symbol, a myth, a political tool. The pseudo-Nero phenomenon demonstrates how conspiracy thinking and resurrection myths were already intertwined in antiquity, offering order and narrative in a world that had lost both. And that in many ways is the problem with conspiracy theories. There are so many of them, and you can go from the pre-Socratics, the Milesian philosophers. The hidden harmony is better than the obvious. The preference for hidden stories makes you sound clever because you've managed to get into the heart of something which has evaded the scholarly investigation. Conspiracy theories are an expression of this metaphysical craving, the belief that not that this thing has happened, but that you are special because you understand. And it's complete rubbish. In Elizabethan and Jacobean England, Jesuits were blamed for fires, for plagues, for the gunpowder plot. Conspiracies were common currency. Thomas Hobbes mocks this later. He says, men measure not only events, but actions and purses by their success, and a little falsehood mingled with the truth will pass the more currently. And this echoes the modern disinformation campaigns. Sprinkle some truth to make the absurd more palatable. And psychologists like Michael Shermer and Karen Douglas argue that we are biologically primed for hyperactive agency detective. That is, our ancestors who assumed the rustle in the grass was a predator, not the wind, survived longer. And Sherman says, we are pattern-seeking animals. We find meaning even where there isn't any. Douglas, in the University of Kent, says the conspiracies are more attractive when people feel powerless, when there's institutional distrust, when there's a lack of information or there's ambiguous evidence. Hence, the conspiracy beliefs spike after terrorist attacks, pandemics, assassinations, political scandals. Think JFK in 1963, Princess Diana in 1997, 9/11 in 2001, COVID-19 in 2020. But it goes all the way back, not only to Nero, but to the protocols of the Elders of Zion, forged by the Tsarist secret police, the Okhrana, in 1903, debunked repeatedly in 1921 by the journalist Philip Graves in the Times, who revealed it had plagiarized a 19th century French satire by Maurice Joly called The Dialogue in Hell between Machiavelli and Montesquieu in 1864, which had nothing to do with Judaism. Yet this forged document inspired Hitler and continues to circulate in anti-Semitic circles globally. The moon landing. The moon landing in 1969, using Hollywood tricks. Even the other day, I saw something where it suggested that which director? The fellow who made 2001. Anyway, had finally claimed that he did it. A complete rubbish. Bill Casing's 1974 book, We Never Went to the Moon, debunked by physics. We have lunar dust. Lunar dust that was kicked up then would behave differently in Earth gravity. Retro reflectors left on the surface of the moon by Apollo missions, used by observatories to this day. Thousands of engineers, astronauts and scientists working independently would have to remain silent for over 50 years, and that is implausible in the extreme. Why is it so implausible? Because even people who've taken an oath that they would be excommunicated if they said anything about the conclave have been chattering like wild geese. And that's only a few days ago, and that's bound by some sort of ecclesiastical probity, and even that doesn't work. Mythbusters like Adam Savage recreated moon scenarios and disproved key hoax claims. The QAnon stuff, this cabal of Satan-worshipping paedophiles running the global elite. Again, it's the narrative tools of biblical symbolism, numerology, and prophecy. And it's easy to debunk, but it doesn't stop people thinking that they are special. And that is the problem. It's in the origins of totalitarianism, Ardent observes that totalitarian systems rely on fictional narratives to claim that claim to reveal hidden truths. The ideal subject of totalitarian rule is not the convinced Nazi or the convicted communist, but people for whom the distinction between fact and fiction no longer exists. This is precisely where conspiracy theory becomes dangerous, when it replaces not just evidence, but the very notion of evidence. Plato saw inspiration in divine madness, but even in divine madness in his dialogues, it must be tested through dialectic. Tall tales are ancient and natural to human minds, especially in times of distress or disorder. Conspiracies appeal to our psychological instinct, but they collapse under the scrutiny of the evidence. Now, challenge today is not merely to debunk falsehoods, but to rekindle an affection for ambiguity, complexity, and uncomfortable truth. That is where reality lies, not in a pat story, but in a story with ends that don't quite meet, with uncertainty. Uncertainty is a guarantee of truth. Tidiness is a guarantee of deceit.